Welcome back to the Obojima Podcast. My name is Jeremiah, and I'm joined by Adam Lee. We are the writers of Obojima, at least most of them.
Mostly.
And you are joining us for our weekly writers meeting, where we sit down, we talk Obojima, and we come up with cool concepts. And that's just what we're going to do today. I have a subclass. I don't know. I have a class idea, a subclass idea. Mm-hmm. It's not really an idea. It's actually what I would say is the start of an idea.
And I don't even know what this is yet.
And it's time for you to tell me what to do with it. Okay. So
cool.
I was thinking, I feel like I'm leaning into witches too much here. It's not necessarily witch, but it's certainly magic heavy. Okay. So I stumbled upon an art piece, which maybe I can find it and send it to Miles and he can throw it on. But it was just of like a person with a giant brush, like a giant
paintbrush
of sorts.
Okay.
That they were like utilizing almost like it was like some sort of combat weapon, right? And I got to thinking about it, and I was thinking about my time in Japan again, and just like how there is like a stamp, like a signature associated with most citizens in Japan, and rather than them signing their names on documents, they will stamp their official stamp onto a thing to sign it, right? So each person has, it's almost like an ID stamp, right? And I was like, what if someone had a giant stamp? And I started playing around with this idea of a magic user who uses stamping seals, like has a collection of stamps that use to press magic into objects or seal creatures, or like to enact the magic that they're trying to cast. They have to press a sealed stamp that they've generated to like do the thing.
Okay.
I don't know what that is, but it's very cool, and I like the idea. And so like I was thinking about it, and like, what could this potentially look like? And in my head, I was like, well, maybe it's some sort of spellcaster. Insert any, like maybe I don't know what category it goes in as far as spellcasters, if it's a sorcerer or a wizard or a bard or whatever it is, but a spellcaster that's enacting these spells through stamping rituals. Or if it's like a close combat type character who's like a fighter or a ranger or a paladin who is utilizing stamps in close combat to produce effects.
Whoa.
Where they're like, I don't know how cool this would be, but you could imagine like at the end of a spear, there's the base portion of a spear, which they could flip and might have a stamp on it. And they like are stamping a character. And then once a character's stamped, they gain some benefit to hit them in some capacity.
Interesting.
And then they have these low-level magic incantations where they're able to do specific things and rituals with stamps. So you could kind of split this off into two different directions. But the overall concept is enacting some sort of spellcasting through the pressing of a stamp onto an object or a creature.
Yeah, I mean, is this a subclass that does like their prep beforehand? Like they're like, right. I've got, let's say you can use, maybe it's like similar to attuning magic items. You're only allowed to attune 3, but maybe in this case you're allowed to have 5 stamps, and that you can, you have a assortment of maybe 15, but you've got to pick the 5 you're going to use for today, and you get 5 stamps a day or something like that, and then you preset your weapons. Like, okay, I'm going to stamp all 3 of my arrows, and I'm going to stamp my buddy's sword. Now you've got a stamp, or I'm gonna stamp my own armor. Or
it's cool. It's like I really like the idea of utilizing stamps, placing stamps ahead of time to then activate them in times of need is really cool.
It almost makes me think of like the Zelda bomb, where you stamp something and then it just sits there, and then at some point you can activate the stamp and it blows up, or does something, or it starts, like you could have a stone that you stamp and then you turn it over and you let it sit in an area, and it can act as a sending stone. And then you have your stone that you're holding on to with the other part of the stamp, and you can activate it, and
it's almost like the
eavesdrop on somebody,
like the stamp, like you're placing the magic into a stamp, and that stamp is is temporarily activating that magic on an object or a creature.
That's
and
cool.
then it dissipates.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like, that concept's really, really cool. What if you it could also be a situation where it's like, what if you take a spell that would normally take an action, and by pre-placing it on something, you can then activate it at a later time as a reaction or a bonus action.
Yeah. Yep.
And so it's like, oh, I'm gonna cast the spell Jump, which is normally an action to cast. I'm gonna cast it through my stamp, and I'm gonna place it on the bottom foot of my ally. And like
on their
as
shoes.
they're like running, you could imagine like everyone's running and they're like, the bridge collapses and they need to leap across, and you activate the thing and they jump over or whatever it is. I think that's really interesting. Now maybe the trade-off there is like you get to activate the jump spell as a reaction, but it only lasts for a round.
Yeah.
So it's like this temporary like flash, you get the magic and then it dissipates.
Yeah.
That could be really cool, where it's like I'm kind of breaking the system a little bit here. But big benefit like in the moment, but it fades pretty fast.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of space, like storytelling wise and role playing wise, for this kind of a character, where you could, stamp your name on an official document, but that stamp is doing something. And so when that official document gets taken and it goes on its merry way, it could be used to spy on, people or like bad guys, or you could put a stamp on an object, and then put it on a wagon, and then it goes, and it's almost like a little tracker,
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's super neat.
I think the question is which direction do we take it in? Do we take it into this big manipulation where you're a wizard type character who's using the potent magic, like this huge layer of spell or a list of spells that they already have access to, and now you're utilizing them in a unique way with the stamps? Or is it you're a fighter or some sort of class who doesn't have access to magic, and this stamp is their unique method to gain minor magical effects? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
and maybe there's two different versions. That's something that's interesting. Maybe it's like, oh, here's the paladin version and here's this bard version.
I mean, I remember like in blacksmithing, like having, you'd have stamp. You'd have you just emboss it, you just bang right into the metal, and it would be like a signature. But you could do that for any number of, metal objects, daggers, arrows, armor, that kind of stuff. The other thing it makes me think of is like that. Imagine designing this class in World Obojima, and what would a stamp mage, like how would that develop over time, and what kind of spells would they have, and just having a list, maybe a small list, like relatively short, not like the whole player's handbook, but just like this small in-world list of unique spells that this special class does.
Yeah.
That are, thinking about what kind of things these stamp mages, like how did they evolve? Like where did they come from? What was
their original purpose?
Yeah.
No, that's a great question.
Like, because to me, it makes me think of scribes and people who are sent, like they're probably tied to the postal brigade. Like they were sealing messages, like, and they were like, well, how do we, probably to secure stuff, like how do we stamp something so that it seals a box?
Well, the issue is we're now stepping on the toes of the Waxwork Rogue.
We are.
So the Waxwork Rogue has a signet ring, and they have a spell called Iron Shield, I believe, or not a spell, but an enchantment called Iron Seal, I think it is, and it does that exact thing. So they, after tying a package or a door or something like that, they would press wax into it with their iron seal, and they would magically lock or seal the package, and you'd have to dispel it or break it in order to get through.
Think of like, so this class and the Waxwork Rogue in World and Obojima, that's the point where they touch, like the two Vens touch. It's like, but this one went into the Waxwork Rogue range, and this other subclass went into this other space. So what is that other space?
So interesting. So are we adding to the Courier Brigade's list of specialty characters that started in the Courier Brigade and broke off?
Yeah, I think that's totally cool.
It's possible. Well, so okay, let's say it starts off potentially not magical, right? These stamps are utilized as signatures as ways to convey information.
Yep. could be like impressed into clay, like the early what they call ostraka, the like it's like cuneiform where they're saying, okay, we're logging, this was how many things, and here's my seal, or here's this symbol represents a number of sheep dragon that we're moving.
Yeah,
that kind of stuff.
I could then see, depending on how it goes, I could then see this as a method potentially of storing. Oh, this is kind of interesting. This could potentially be a method of storing magic to sell to people, kind of like scrolls, that then gets replaced later by VHS and cassettes being better at doing it.
Whoa.
So like perhaps a VHS and cassette, when you store magic in it, right, it's kind of like it lasts for a permanent amount of time until used.
Yeah.
And then these always have like a 24-hour or a month or a week-long period. So eventually people stopped practicing this because it's like, well, it's better to, we have all these cassettes and VHS lying around and they're reusable, so why not utilize these instead? And so this kind of method of like using, like, I'm going to stamp the sleep spell, or I'm going to stamp the destroy and create water spell into a document, and I'm going to sell it to you, but you have to go use it right now, compared to a different wizard being like, I'm just going to store that spell in cassette tape, use it whenever you need. So maybe like this was the starting of that practice of storing spells and objects and selling them.
Yeah.
And it could kind of exist in that space.
Could it also play with spell slots? Like
possibly
these things are that you can create a spell slot, like a temporary one.
Yeah. It's kind of cool.
Okay.
So it starts off in some capacity as like to share magic at a distance with people, potentially. And then it kind of does this transformation. Maybe they start moving. They start, I guess, let's say it is connected to the Courier Brigade. I have a question on whether they traveled with the Postal Knights ever, or if they stayed behind. It's like, oh, I'm not going to travel with you. No. That's where the Waxwork Rogue goes. The Waxwork Rogue keeps the package safe. So do the Postal Knights. I stay in Yadaman. I'm just making I'm the one who's enchanting these documents and packaging them, and you take them for me, but I'm not going on the trip.
Yeah. That makes more sense.
But maybe that's where the transition happens, where it's like, oh, that could be really cool. Okay. I know I'm talking like crazy. I'm going all over the place. All these things are connected.
Yeah.
Maybe it starts as like, I'm a wizard who stays in Yadaman and I deliver these packages. And slowly over time, they need the wizard to start joining them. Like, no, we need you to be able to deliver these. Like, you need to come with, you need to be able to continuously keep maybe you need to keep the stamp alive or whatever it is. Who knows? And that's where the transition goes from like wizard to now the paladin version of this subclass starts to form. And so now there's this subsect where it's like you need to be a postal knight, but you also need to be able to do this, the stamping enchantments. And so there's like this martial version of this wizard subclass that forms. That's the paladin version. And then there's the wizard version that's so it's like the same thing, utilizing the same style of magic, but broken off into two different subcategories of each other.
Yeah, like, when I think of, all right, you're in Obojima, you've got, these two different things. Like, what are some reasons why you need to say, maybe, things to like stamp your armor to make it super light?
Yeah.
Like, okay, I've got to go through a swamp. There's a risk of if I fall off my mount, I can get stuck in the swamp if I'm wearing full plate. Making your armor super light, or other things that are useful to OBG. Maybe there's, if you're going to go up into the Mount Arbora and it's going to get cold.
Yeah.
There's a stamp that actually creates heat,
So I almost wonder if it's like this subclass gets a huge array of cantrips that are unique to them.
Yeah.
Where it's like, there's the core ability, but it's like, oh yeah, you have like 15 cantrips that you have access to. Wow. And your stamps allow you to access them all. And then you get some minor spells down the line, but the core of what this class is about is the things that they, like these small features that the Obojimans need and want and desire.
Yeah.
The ability to make your armor lighter, or though to keep you warm at night when you can't have a fire. Like those small things that you could potentially come up with unique ways to utilize them in the game. obviously mechanically they have to be useful in some way, but I really like that. I like just having a huge variety of these little stamps you can access.
I like also, like the spell Prestidigitation. It does like a whole suite of things.
Yeah.
And they're fun. Some of them, just like you make a crazy noise or it's like there's these creative ways that players can use that spell in all different kinds of role-playing situations. But it would, for an Obojima adventure, like you're dealing with things like you're at a festival and there's a bake-off, and you've got to like cook, some kind of, maybe you're cooking a special kind of ramen dish. It's like there are these things that come up in an Obojima story where you need to have this different kind of skill set. Maybe there are stamps that are like Prestidigitation where it has a suite of sort of in-world Obojima things that you might kind of encounter. Like, for instance, you could stamp a frying pan and that frying pan will never get hot enough to burn stuff. So you're never going to critical fail. Like if you roll a 1 when you're trying to do the bake off and you go, but I've got a stamp on there that does that. It could negate that. It could be things like that. If I'm thinking of like a suite of cantrips, like not every cantrip is going to be like, something super awesome. I mean, a lot of them are going to be like for combat situations. There might be a lot of spells that are just very story based. But all like around in-world possible things that you encounter.
You almost want to make it you almost need to make a cantrip that's like Prestidigitation or what's the other one? Thaumaturgy.
Yeah.
Where it's very vague. Like they give you examples, but they keep it vague on purpose.
Yeah.
Because then you can do things like
make stuff up.
Like you can have a little fun with this. Be creative with your cantrip.
Yeah.
As long as you and the DM, as long as you don't abuse that power. I think that's the issue. Is Prestidigitation and Thaumaturgy are often abused. And so we'll try to set some groundworks when it comes to those. But I think that's super interesting.
Yeah.
We already made a cantrip that was vague. And already, people were very like, not everyone, but there were a handful of people who are like, oh yeah, this is how you would abuse these things. And it's like, well, don't allow that. I think ours was task, which lets you complete a simple task and things like that. And after it was said and done, we ended up having to reword that like 3 or 4 times to try to really nail the don't abuse this. And so we'd have to do something similar. But I really like the idea of these two subclasses, right? Like a spellcaster. I'm thinking almost like a bard, maybe. Potentially. Yeah. Because if it's story driven, like if it's like these stamps originated in giving information and telling stories, potentially. Like as like a way to share information, the bard.
If it's a bard, it makes me think of like your original image that you had was this person with a paintbrush.
Yeah.
I mean that feels very bardy, like almost like a going on maybe painting on walls these like images or these symbols, and then that does something.
Yeah.
That does something interesting.
It's kind of cool.
It also like makes, when I think about like a person who like this mage or wizard or whatever, it's like they have these wooden stamps that are like attached to their body and like a whole like ring of keys. Yeah.
Like something like that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're just like, they're kind of,
a
clattering
huge
around.
collection of random trinkets. Yeah.
And I mean, some things could be that there's an actual thing that you actually stamp something with, but some of them could be pre-stamped and you could throw it like almost like Gambit when he's throwing magic cards. It's like just throwing a stamp in and then something happens. Poof. Yeah.
Okay, so let's look at the idea of the kind of paladin fighter version of this subclass. I think one thing that I've already done this a couple times, right? Our rogue subclass and our fighter subclass, and I think that's it. Oh well, the barbarian kind of. I give a lot of options. I purposely give a lot of options, but specifically in the rogue and the fighter, I give you They're called enchantments with the rogue, which are different ways you can infuse magic into candles. And then in the fighter, they're, I think, not fusions, but object manipulate. I can't remember exactly what I call them. But they're different ways that you can infuse magic into objects through your spirit. And so in both circumstances, you're given a variety of options, like 12 or 15 or 18. And then you pick like a handful, and those are the ones that your specific character can do. And so what I'm anxious about is, I don't know, that's how I personally enjoy building characters. I really love options. I think what it does is it allows you to build a character that is unique to your game and also unique to you. So like, for example, if you're playing the rogue, you could forego all the damaging abilities and it could all be utility, fun, story-driven stuff. And then if you're playing in a game where you're very combat heavy, you could shift to be all very combat heavy. That's a choice that is left to the players.
And we could put that in the subclass when we write it out, is like, say, all right, here's all the options. But for people who get option paralysis, we could just do little build outs.
Right.
Like if you want to roll a smasher, like a barbarian or a fighter guy, here's like the basic loadout you'd want, and if you want to roll a rogue up, like a rogue type, here's the loadout you would use. So that way it for people who get option paralysis, it's just like makes it easy for them.
My question is there a way to do this fighter subclass without giving 1,000 options? Is there a way to say, like, here, every subclass or every fighter subclass that's the stamp fighter gets all of these options, and we don't necessarily build out the battle master style.
The way to do that is through story, is to like create a story for this character, this subclass that then hones that down. So we would just have to build the story around this. This fighter evolved this way in Obojima, and here's why that they only have these few things, but these few things they do, they approach with this like sense of mastery. Like they are focused on these things because eventually they'll get super strong and super crazy, because ultimately that's what you want. You want a super fighter. So we could do that. Just cool. Kind of create the story around it.
So we could narrow it down. Still give them plenty of, maybe, if we're looking at the mage version of this as like the ultimate formation, like the purest version of this stamp subclass is the mage, and then it's diluted and mixed with a postal knight, and it becomes this paladin version. So like if all the options are given to the mage, then only some of the options are given to the fighter. But those fighter options that are given are really honed and super potent. Yeah,
they're super specific to it. Okay, so now I'm channeling Ari.
Okay.
Because he just like came in like, must do this. So I'm thinking of stamping.
Okay.
And then I'm thinking of, is this a class that uses bludgeoning weapons? Because it's like a stamp.
Yeah.
So you just imagine a two-headed warhammer.
Yeah.
On one hand is a stamp, the other head is a different stamp, and you can flip it around, and when you hit something, boom, it leaves that stamp. You could also do something where it's a round thing, but it's got multiple stamps on it. And of course, through the practice, you know how to spin this thing. And it's like, the old typewriters where it had like all the words, all the letters, and then as it hit the paper, it would rotate.
It would shift. Yeah. That's
You
cool.
could have a object like that. So, but they only get to use bludgeoning weapons, and that's the limitation. And everybody goes, no,
I want a sword.
I want a sword. I want all the Sharpies. It harkens back to the old D&D. Like, like clerics only got to use maces.
Yeah.
So you get to have like your little cleric feeling.
Too soon. Too soon.
Oh, the woundedness. They're like, oh, how dare you?
I can't. There's so many comments. It's the video we have with the most comments on it.
Bring them the comments. Love it. Love the comments.
Okay, so,
but yeah,
I like that. That's interesting.
Bludgeoning weapon. You could have maybe even interesting designs. Maybe like a four-headed warhammer. It's fantasy.
That's cool. It's
crazy. Yeah.
Hey, it's fantasy.
Yeah. Just tell your artist like, hey, can you make a cool looking four-headed warhammer?
Yeah. I like that.
Or like a flanged mace, where it's like at the ends of the flange of the mace is done in a pattern.
Yeah.
And so like, and the neat thing is like, you see something on it, you hit something and leaves that pattern in there.
Okay, this gets really complicated.
Love it.
But I'm gonna add some complexity here.
Oh my god.
So let's say you have 4 stamps. Let's say you're you're wielding a club or something like that. It has 4 sides, or a mace or a hammer, and you hit the enemy with one of these stamps, but you don't proc it. Right, I feel like I'm talking. I feel like my old gaming terms are coming out. You don't activate the ability, right?
Yeah.
So you hit him with the stamp, and it's sitting there. And at any given time, you could do something with that stamp. Like let's say,
I love it
say
already.
You smack him and you hit him with the fire stamp or something like that, and it's like, as part of the attack, maybe you could have also set them ablaze, but you decided not to.
That's when somebody throws the alchemical oil.
Ari.
Oh, see, Ari likes this idea. Because this is why Ari likes this idea, is because you're comboing with your party.
Yeah.
You're comboing with your pals. I hit him with the fire stamp, but I don't proc it. Is that? See, I'm catching on. And then your buddy throws the alchemical oil.
Yeah.
Bloop, hits the monster, and then you activate the fire.
Yeah. It's cool.
And you got a monster torch.
So I could add some more complexity to it.
Love it.
So let's say you have 4 stamps, and each one does a different thing, right? Like maybe one of them pacifies a monster, or the other one does a fire damage, whatever. What happens if you stamp a monster twice with 2 different stamps? When you activate it, does it proc both of them at the same time? Or does it make a new spell?
I love this.
It gets really complicated.
I love this.
It gets really complicated. So you'd have to narrow it. So the first thing is get rid of 4. Let's make it 3.
Maybe that's as you progress. Maybe you only can do combos later on. So it's like, hey, if you're going to opt into this character and you want to play it, here's the simple stuff. But if your character gets up to like level 7 or 8, then you can combo.
That's a very complex character, but it's cool.
It's cool.
It's very cool to be like, I'm going to combine the fire stamp and the aggression stamp, and when you combine them, it sends them
aggro fire.
Yeah, maybe it lights them on fire and it sends them into a frenzy.
Yeah,
and now all your attacks made against them are at advantage because they're under the frenzy ability.
That's great. And it also kind of explains earlier on when you're saying like the mage is the one that has access to all of these things, but then the fighter classes, they have less of them, but you can mix and match. And so therefore you regain that complexity.
Yeah.
But we have, again, we'd have to, 4 times 4 is 16, right? So it's like
it's a lot.
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
So is it 3 times 3? It's like you get 3. There's 3. There's 3 options in the beginning, and you're like, oh, that's really simple. But then it exponentiates,
right?
And then by the time you're like, oh wow, I got 9 different ways I can mishmash these together, and each one does some. And another way we can we can make it more simple is that these things are intuitive. Like it's like if you mix fire and this, you get something that's intuitively, oh yeah, I could see how these 2 things mix. It's not something really abstract and weird.
So okay, so let's go back to 4 for a second. So what we're saying then, so let's say I'm going to give elemental types here to make it easy, but that's just to give examples. So you hit him with the fire.
Yep.
Then you hit him with the ice.
Oh.
And now it's turned into something else, right? Now it's turned into steam.
Yeah.
It's turned into the steam seal. So we've made one combination. Then you hit them with lightning.
Oh, man.
And so now the question is, does the lightning mix with the steam to make another combination? Or do you have to mix the lightning with the water again to make the static shock? And those like I'm almost like you can imagine the seals as level, like you combine 2 level 1s to make a level 2. If I add another level 1, does that combine with the level 2 to make a level 3, or do I need 2 level 2s to make a 3?
I see.
This is very complicated. Again, I'm sorry everyone, this is going down a crazy. It could be really cool. It could be the most complicated subclass in the world that everyone hates.
Yeah. That sounds very complex. Like, it sounds very cool, though. Like...
Well, but that's get the multiplication of 4, we'd have to do that in some capacity, right? So it's like, let's say we did 3. We did 3 stamps. If we're only combining them, you can make... ice, fire, electricity. Electricity goes with water. Electricity goes with fire. Fire goes with electricity. Now we've done all the combinations.
Yeah.
So that's...
Are there things that just don't mix? So is it like a rock, paper, scissors kind of deal where it's like, okay, these combos, like in Zelda, when you mix the wrong things together, you get like dubious food, and you're just like, it still heals a little bit, but it doesn't do anything awesome. So,
I think there's maybe the answer on that one is maybe. I don't quite know. Like maybe you have to get it. Maybe it's more like potion recipes, and you have to get a certain collection of different stamps on a creature to activate a special ability. Where it's like,
because this makes me think then you're going to have to discover new stamps
potentially,
and you might not know what this new stamp does. Like it won't be as intuitive as like air, fire, earth, water. It'll be like, this is a stamp. You don't know what it does. And you're just like, well, I'm just going to try and combo it with this other stamp. But the DM will know it.
Right. Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah. It seems to put a lot of load on the DM that way.
I think you have it so the player... I think the player could have a list of recipes, and they're just trying to build out those recipes in combat. Where it's like, I need 2 fires and an electric, and that makes this specific combination that does this cool thing.
Yeah.
And it's like most combinations are 2 or 3. Where it's like, oh yeah, you have 4 stamps. They all do these base level things. Maybe they're all elemental or something. Yeah. But combining them in this, if you do 3, that's quite complicated. If maybe there's a 4 and 5 at later levels, and that's like hard to pull off. But when you do pull off 5 against a creature, you're like, oh man, this was awesome.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. Like, how does that work in combat? Like,
so every time you successfully hit a creature, you leave a stamp.
So then if you're like on a multi-attacker, you definitely want a multi-attacker then.
Yeah. So the base fighter gets multi-attack.
Yep.
The question is, do you let bonus action attacks through to dual wielding? So could I get 2 could I get 2 clubs?
Yeah.
Like small clubs and do
dual wield,
in which case I'm proccing 3 stamps at a time. Which we don't have to. We can say barbarians basically force you to use great clubs and great swords, so you could do the same thing where it's like, we're forcing you to use heavy weapons.
Yep.
Or halberds or something like that, two-handed. So you're only making 2 attacks. So then if you were to do a 3 proc thing, it would take 2 turns to activate it.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, or you could action surge to proc, maybe get a 4 in a single round, which could be really cool.
That's fun. I mean, it creates like, I mean, is there a situation where you wouldn't want to do that every turn?
I think it just depends on how heavy into combat we're leading this character into.
I mean,
because if it's like, okay, all of your stamps are about hitting a creature, then they're gonna proc at every turn.
Yeah.
Maybe they're procking 1 or 2. Maybe at the end of the turn they're like, maybe the concept, it's best for you to always proc at the end of the game, or at the end of the round, or the end of the turn, whether you have 2 or 4 or 5, whatever it is. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's better for you to just like land a bunch of these and trying to build up as big of a stamp collection as possible on a creature before hitting it. And that's, maybe that's the style of play. It's like, look, it's going to take me 2 or 3 rounds, but once I get my 3rd round, guys, I'm going to do the craziest thing ever. Like, I'm going to, this character's going to turn to stone.
It's
whatever
like
it is.
Tasha's hideous laughter and Otto's irresistible dance. And
it's like the whole thing. I'm going to summon a band.
Yeah, that's right. It could. So, again, channeling Ari, like, and you just hit on it, which is like, what is the player demographic that wants to run this character? If it is, I can do all these, like, I've been watching these YouTube videos on people who do these crazy Zelda machines, and it's like this giant arena and this floating thing with jet engines on it, and they throw in a chicken and they fire this thing up and it roasts the chicken, and then it comes out on a conveyor belt like this roast chicken. He goes and grabs the chicken, plunk. And it's like it's a Rube Goldberg machine, but it's just that you get to see it happen. If that's what this character, this is, if you're that kind of player, this is your character.
Yeah.
That's the thing we have to kind of figure out is like, and we could get the best of both worlds where it's like, if you like the idea of the stamp magic, you could opt to play the wizard character and you get the more sort of reasonable, less like flashy, flamboyant, I'm going to do this crazy machine. And when it goes off, oh my God, everybody's going to lose their mind. But you can have the wizard be sort of the more practical character where it's like doing practical magic and being very thoughtful about it. Then you can have the fighter character, which is this more kind of crazy flamboyant thing. We could do that, or could do it where it's the reverse, Yeah. So
I don't hate it.
Yeah, it's fun.
There's also an interesting design choice that I was thinking about as you were talking, which is like if we're making this complexity, you could potentially add this unique system, which is all stamps proc when you activate it. So it's like, for example, let's say you and I are in combat, and I go and I hit the troll twice, and I got his knees stamped with the stamp of old man to slow him down. And then you go down, he throws a tree branch and hits you. And I have to run over and hit you with a stamp that's going to like revive you or heal you or something like that. When I activate the healing stamp, all stamps proc, so including the stamps on the troll. So it's like, it's a choice where it's like, oh man, I want to build up more stamps on this troll right now, but I need to get you up.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do this anyways. And it's like this, it makes this interesting mechanic where it's like, when you have to choose between combat and non-combat stamps, you're proccing them all at once. And so it leads to this like, and maybe it's the most amazing, 4D chess play of your life where it's like, I'm going to stamp the troll with the slowing stamp, and then I'm going to wait to heal my buddy. And the moment I heal my buddy, he's stuck in a pit or something like that. And then my buddy comes up. It's like, you could chain these into these really unique plays.
Yeah.
Which could be really fun.
I mean, it could be like, you actually, you're fighting the troll and you hit the ground to create like a 10 by 10 by 10 pit.
Yeah.
And then, you hit the troll, which like, it's called like a tractor, and it attracts to the whatever stamp you've got, and he's just kind of like gonna hang out at that spot, or it, you can set these things up, and
it's
then
pretty cool.
And then when you say activate, all of them activate, like you said.
And maybe the trick is you can use your reaction to activate a stamp at any time.
That's great. Yeah.
So then it's like, then you can really,
because it'd be like verbal, or
it'd be verbal, or some sort of
snap your fingers, like.
I mean, that's really cool. You're running away from the troll. I'm down. You're running away from the troll. As you run away, you spend your action to stamp the ground with reverse gravity or something like that.
Yeah.
And then you go over and you grab me, and you bonus action to stamp me with the healing spell, but you don't activate it. You wait for the troll's turn, and as the troll's he runs over your stamp. You reaction click both of them. You heal me and reverse gravity at the same time. Very interesting play style.
It is.
Where reactions are really important, though.
Reactions are huge important. And also then it kind of gets into like, it makes me think of like when you're playing Magic, you have what's called the stack.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the first is the last. So the card that goes down is the last card that activates. So you get this stack of, depending on how complex you wanted to get it, it would have to be, and maybe, this character, like maybe we can include cards that come with the game, so you could like sort of like, list, because if, like what's the most complex, like, is it 4? Like maybe we set a limit, like you can have 4 stamps in active action at any time.
Yeah.
And when the 5th stamp comes, it automatically
destroys
procs.
The first one.
Yeah. Or destroys.
Or I like that. That's cool.
Yep. So that way you kind of set a limit as to how complex and crazy it can get.
This is
it's fun.
Really interesting fighter combat subclass here.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to see what the mage version of this also looks like, and how that plays into all of this.
Yeah. I mean, the mage could operate with like a rubber stamp. It's, you step in the ink and bonk, or you put, maybe it's a wand that you're actually throwing like these glowing runes through the air, and they go shtunk, and they stick on people, and they're like stamps. It could also be like the magic paintbrush, where maybe the paintbrush is a wand, and you're kind of doing graffiti on the walls, and you're opening portals and things like that.
There's a lot of really cool, like, I'm imagining this mage. There's just a lot of flavor there. I think the flavor, I don't want to do like a wand or something like that, because I like the flavor of them having to physically stamp something. Okay. And so like with this mage, the question is like, do you have like 3 mage hands going, and each one has a stamp in it, and they're all like over stamping creatures or something like that. I just like I also like the concept of going back to my original thought, which is like a character with a huge stamp on their back or something like that. Like a giant stamp. Is there size difference in stamps that produces different effects? Like you could almost imagine, to harken back to Naruto, which I know I feel like I bring that up quite often, but like they'll have scrolls that they'll pull out, and they'll be pre-written, for lack of better terms, like magical incantations on these scrolls, and then they finish the incantation, usually with blood. They'll like bite their finger and finish the writing, and then they do something. And so either it's sealing or it's summoning, oftentimes is what it is. So they'll finish a scroll, they'll do a thing, and they'll summon a giant toad, or they'll summon a snake, or they'll summon another person, or a dog, or something like that, or a weapon. And so it's like maybe they like summon this giant stamp that's the size of a small wagon or something like that, and they stamp a summoning circle into the ground, or like teleportation circle. You know how teleportation takes 10 minutes to set up your thing? Yeah. What if they could stamp that onto the ground?
Yeah.
Just like, in an instant.
It's interesting. I mean, like if this class basically has access to all wizard spells, then that's one thing. But if this class is limited to summoning, like it's just a summoner,
right?
Or then you think of like writing the name of a creature, and then when you stamp it, it can summon that creature.
Yeah. Protect that creature. Maybe it like you write the name of a creature and you stamp it, and it silences them. They can't speak.
Yeah.
Like I feel like there's a lot of things you could do. Now that's also leads into flavor versus spellcasting, which is like, D&D, I think in one of their books released like the magic missile spell if cast by a farmer, and it's like the missiles look like chickens. Yeah. Right? You can flavor your spells however you want. So
I made that one.
You made that? Yeah. You made the chicken farmer?
Yep. I made the
That's you.
Yep.
That's, hey.
Yep. Your magic missiles look like chickens.
Magic missiles look like chickens.
Yep.
So taking that same thing, like you could just say, oh, I write the character's name down and I stamp it. And then that's really just you casting silence.
Yeah. Yes.
So we don't necessarily need to go into that regard unless it's like a character that might not normally have access to the spell silence.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess that's the next thing is, is the wizard or the mage version of this subclass manipulating spells that they already have access to in a different way? Like again, like the ability to cast a spell as a reaction or as a bonus action or something like that, that normally would be an action, or do they have an all brand new set of abilities brought on by these spells?
I mean, I think in the best, because like a lot of, D&D spells are kind of like the sort of Saruman, Gandalf mage battle where they're hurling stuff back and forth. This to me feels different in that you've got stamps and like, you're not like holding up a stamp and pshow, like shooting things. That's where I start to think of it in this thing of magic wands. But if it's like the flavor of this is like, no, it's actually imprinting this magic ink onto a surface, and that's the magic of this, then it's probably some kind of special thing that we're going to create story-wise. Right. And then that makes me think of like, how does it evolve? How did this form in this branch of, wizardry evolve out of Obojima? Like, why was it developed? What specific purpose was it designed to accomplish? And then where is it going? Like, when these wizards that are developing these kinds of spells, where are they taking the magic? It's like, you think of physicists, and that some of them are building machines that are designed to look into the human body, you know, and as it's developing, it's getting more and more high res, and it's getting, you can look through the bones, and you can get down to, you can see nerves and that. So this branch of magic is going along. What is it that they want to do? Like, we had that thing where we're like, okay, the Waxwork Rogue was designed to seal and protect packages. Yeah. This group now was, maybe it branched off into fighting, because then you have these fighters, but like, where is this one going? And that's the big question. I'm still kind of working on that one.
I don't know either.
Yeah.
It's I think it's something we should probably talk about off camera.
Off camera.
I know.
Because, it's like, okay, I'm going to go do stamp and cast lightning bolt, or do stamp and cast magic missile, or do stamp and cast mage hands. Well, okay.
Yeah.
But, in combat, in my head, does it look cool? My dude, like, flipping out and boom, like, it's like, what's the cool version of that?
Yeah.
Like,
to me, I think you said it earlier. It's like it's the preparation that makes this feel unique. It's the I've stamped a bunch of objects leading into combat, or I've gone through the environment before the combat started, and I put a stamp on the ground or around the trees. Or it's like the effort that cool. This mage puts in beforehand, thinking through what will come and trying to prepare for it.
Makes me think of that they're a sort of in clairvoyant magic, like divination. Like if you looked at the wizard schools, that they would be in divination magic. A lot of like the premonitions and presage, and like being able to say, oh, we're in, or they're tactical. They're like sort of battle masters in a way, but they're wizards where they're saying, okay, we're gonna lure these bad guys or monsters into this canyon. Yeah. But all through the side of the canyon, I'm going to put these symbols, these stamps on the walls. And, these boulders will have stamps underneath them. And at some point I can trigger it and boom.
I think that's what I really like about that. Yeah. Like, sweet. You're, as this mage, you might, if you were a party member with this mage, you'd wake up in the morning and like, your chef would be like, all right, I'm going to cook some food. And then maybe the potion brewer's like, all right, everyone, here's a couple potions. And then this mage would come out and be like, all right, stand in line. Everyone get their stamps. And they come over and like, okay, protection on you, agility, blah, 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 and like goes through and does like this, like there's like a 10-minute process in the morning where it's like, I give everyone 3 to 4 stamps. Yeah. And then throughout the day, you just have this ability to proc it when you need. It's about preparation and doing all these things.
And there are players that are totally like that.
Oh, it's so good.
I've played with a bunch of different groups, and in every group, invariably, there's somebody's like, okay, before this combat, you're going to want to do that, and you're going to think, and I'm going to give you this the ring of protection, and there is that player. Yeah. And this would be perfect for that player.
Okay, seeing how the two subclasses sit next to each other, the mage is environmental and protective against players.
Okay.
And the fighter is specifically about stamping the enemy. So it's like you're both having these subset of stamps, but one of them is about like thinking through one of them is like preparing, and the other one's like in the moment I'm stamping.
In the moment. Yeah, I'm on the fly. That's
legit. So cool. I love it. I would love to see a group where these two characters are in the same.
Holy smokes. Yeah.
So much fun.
That'll be great.
All right. We've already gone past our time.
Oh, the puck of time is
well, I hope you enjoyed this. Hopefully this is an idea you all think is cool. If you have any stamp ideas, I would love to hear them in the comments. Like, what are cool stamp abilities for either the fighter or the mage?
Yeah.
And also, what subclass should these be? Right. So, is the mage a druid? Is it a?
Yeah.
I don't think it's a sorcerer. Wizard makes the most sense.
Wizard,
maybe bard. And then for the fighter, I could see this being I could see this being a ranger. I could see this being a fighter. I could see this being a paladin.
Barbarian, maybe?
Maybe. Well, barbarian's hard because they're you're intending to use magic. The moment you go into a rage, you're not like magic using anymore.
Yeah.
But anyways, tell us what you think. We'd love to hear it because we're not settled on anything. That's for sure.
We haven't put our stamp on it yet.
You can join the Discord we got Miles off of the background. You can join the Discord to talk about it there as well. And we have Instagram and TikTok where we do short form clips of other things and cool stuff. Blah, 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 blah. Thank you so much. Follow, like, subscribe, all that jazz. And we will catch you next time.
Bye.
See ya.